Hey everyone, this is Zach here. Today I'm going to walk through an example using Ansible-sign to create a signature for your content that you're going to be uploading to Ansible Automation Platform as a project via some sort of Git repository usually to ensure that the content that's being executed when run through your platform is the content that you would expect it to be. So establishing a trusted supply chain for our automation content. In this first example, I'm going to be leveraging ansible-sign through the CLI, which is a great way to get started, get a feel for how it works. And then in a future post, I plan to build out a CI/CD pipeline to make this more team-friendly, right? As we have teams collaborating on Ansible content, it doesn't necessarily make sense to be doing this on the CLI. But I hope you're able to follow with me along on this video to get a feel for it, implement it against one of your repositories, and then ultimately move forward in the future and be able to share it with your teams. So the first thing you'll need to do is make sure that you have GNU PG installed on your machine. For me, I'm a Mac user, so I just did brew install GNU PG. But for any system, just give it a quick Google and you'll find out pretty clear instructions on how to get the GPG CLI tool. And once you have it installed, the first command we're going to use is GPG full generate key. If you already have a GPG keypair, you can skip those two steps. But for the purposes of demonstration, I'll go ahead and click enter here. And you'll get prompted for a few things. So for instance, I'll select an RSA key. It can be between 1024 and 4096. I use 2048. And then keep going and following through the prompts, right? So I can have the key expire or not expire. It'll ask me for my email and my name and things like that. And ultimately it will generate a GPG key for me. I'm going to exit out of that because I already have one. But once you finish through and generate the key, the next thing you'll want to do is GPG-list keys. And you'll get an output of all the GPGs and keys in your key ring. For me, I have one here. And the important value is going to be, we're looking for this fingerprint because we're going to use this to go ahead and export a public key. So that's the next step, is go ahead and doing GPG. I'm going to actually go ahead and find it in my history. So you can see here this GPG export command, which is also in the blog post, is how you can take the key that you just generated, export a public key to a file. And we're going to save that file and use it later on. But the important thing is that we've created this key, which Ansible-sign can now leverage to sign our Ansible content. So having stepped through that, the next thing we'll want to do before we actually start the signature creation is create a manifest. So the manifest is going to live in your repository and define what content within the repo should be signed and also validated on the other end. Now it's important to make sure this manifest is comprehensive, and I'll admit that it's a bit of a learning curve for me as you kind of test out signing and verifying and realize like you have to be very explicit. So for instance, anything in your git ignore, you got to make sure in your manifest that you're actually excluding those files, because if you don't, the signature won't include them, and then when you go to verify, those files are going to exist and cause issues for you, right? Or vice versa, they won't exist when you push it up to your remote version and pull it down, and then the manifest is going to be looking for them. So I'll give you a quick example of mine. This is what my manifest file looks like. At the top, I start with my recursive includes, and so this is going to basically go and include the files in those directories. I then have some explicit includes, and you'll see a few different ways of doing it. You can specify the file name, or you can use wildcard patterns as well. I then do an explicit exclude as well as my recursive excludes. And ultimately I end with a global exclude, basically saying I don't want any files that match these patterns in the signature at all. And the manifest is processed top down, right? So the way it starts, as you can imagine, it's adding all these files to the manifest based off of the includes, and then it will remove anything that matches an exclude. Or even if it wasn't included yet, it just won't be in there at all. And ultimately, finally, that global exclude will apply any patterns to all directories. So that's how the manifest works. And like I said, I would trial and error it. So create the manifest to the best of your ability the first time, and then start testing with the Ansible-sign commands. So the first thing you're going to do is actually Ansible-sign project, and then GPG sign, and I'm using dot basically to just indicate that I'm in the root, or I'm in the directory where my manifest lives. And if I hit enter here, it's going to generate the signature for me, and you'll see that it created a manifest file in the .ansible-sign directory, which we'll want to make sure we push up to our repository for validation kind of downstream. And then what I can do as well is run the similar GPG command. So Ansible sign project GPG verify, and do it also against the same repository. And I can see that my checksum succeeded. So I personally don't ever expect myself to run these commands every time I want to make a change and commit it to my repo and then ultimately push it up. So what I've done is I've created a script in my precommit hook, which if you're not familiar with git hooks, just go to your .git/hooks directory in your repository, which is automatically created, and look at the various hooks that you can kind of tie into. For me, my example is going to be the precommit, so I'll open and show you what my script actually looks like. So it's pretty simple. You'll see here, I just export a couple of things which make it possible for me to execute these commands without any user input. That passphrase there is going to be important. So when you generated your key at the beginning, it would have prompted you for a passphrase for that key. You'll put that value in here to match up. There are other ways to do this, right? If you want to use environment variables, things like that, feel free to do so. This file is not version controlled, so there's no risk of me pushing it up and exposing a secret. So I feel comfortable there. And then you'll see that the commands that I just run, right? So I have the GPG sign. I then stage those files, right? Because I want to make sure I have the latest signature. I do the verify, and then if the verify succeeds, I'm just kind of clearing out those environment variables that I set in both cases. And then if it was actually a failure, I exit to block the commit, right? So then I would get a failure message when trying to commit and need to go and investigate and fix it. So this makes sure that my signature that gets pushed up with each commit matches to the files I expect it to match to, right? Versus me making a change to a file, committing it, and forgetting to re-sign, in which case the signature wouldn't match the change I just made. So, for example, I'm going to make a quick change here just to show what the process would look like. So I'll just check out my blog post here, tiny change, and I'll go ahead and git add, and I'll do a tiny commit to say demo change to signed content. And what we should see here is when I hit commit, that pre-commit hook will run, a new signature will be generated and verified, and then the commit will be finalized. So see the output of the two commands running and then the commit happening. So now I can push it to my remote repository. And now we get into the Ansible Automation Platform side of things. So I'm going to open up Ansible Automation Platform, go ahead and log in here, and I'm going to go to the Credentials tab. So if I haven't done this before, I'm going to go into Create Credential, and for the credential type, I'm going to select GPG public key. And here I would upload the contents of the export command that we ran earlier, right? So that I named it zleblanc gpg.asc. So I would go and find that file and upload it here. I could also just cat it out and copy and paste. I linked in the blog post as well my public key. So if you want to test this process against my Linux management repo just to walk through it, you're more than welcome to do so as well there. But just upload that content, create a credential. I'm going to back out of this because I already have one. So if I search for it, this is my instance of that credential type. And the next step is going to be going to your project. So for me, it's going to be my Linux management project. I go into this edit view here. I've already attached it. So for you, this would be an empty field, and you'll want to go select the GPG public key that you created, attach it to your project, and save it. And then the final thing to do will be to sync it. And if anything went wrong in this process, this sync would fail. But for me, you can see that the sync actually succeeded. And if I go into my jobs and I go to that job log, you'll see that there is a step happening during that project sync to verify the project content against checksum. So pretty cool, right? We now have a trusted supply chain for this particular project in our platform. And this is a great way to kind of enable teams to collaborate and build automation, but also doing so in a secure way. We can enforce things like making sure that anything that gets into a repository goes through a review process by building this signing into a pipeline, right? So any random user doesn't necessarily have the private key to create the signature. So they may be able to modify files, but if they don't go through a review process, which will actually do the signature, there's no way for them to get content that they've changed into AAP without first being reviewed. So a lot of cool things you can do with content validation, and stay tuned for looking at how I can build this process out into a CI/CD pipeline. As always, if you have questions, please drop a note in the comments, and I'll answer when I can. And thank you for listening.